am I really just a person who cannot sit by myself during these isolated periods of COVID? Do I really need to surround myself with people and noise and just fluff to feel like I'm doing something positive in my life?
Awareness is really like the first step to even making any change or effecting or wanting any change for yourself. Because if you're not aware of what's there, what needs to change, then you will not be convinced enough to make that change. And I think being aware can be difficult, and it's easier to do things autopilot because it takes courage to like really listen to yourself, right? To really ask yourself those hard questions. And I think it's easier to ignore it than like confront it. I think it takes a set of skills, and that's where I strongly believe things like therapy comes in, having conversations like this comes in.
Hi there, and welcome to the weekly Wasal with Ahad. I am joined today by a very good acquaintance of mine who I hope turns friend after this conversation. But Lillian is here with me. Me and Lillian actually met on Lillian's podcast a few months ago when I was just a new dad and life was just all over the place. And now, almost a year, a few months later, life has changed. My daughter is trying to walk, and Lillian is now on my podcast. So things have changed, everything is changing, and with change also comes new things and new ideas. So Lillian is here to help us a little bit understand of why we do what we do. And that's going to happen through Lillian's own stories to explain to us why she did what she did so far in the last few years till now. Some of them is going to be really interesting. Some of them is going to be a bit heartbreaking. And I'm really, really curious to hear Lillian's perspective. So you guys are looking at her screen, looking at your screen and looking at her right now already. But now I'm going to give her a chance to speak. So Lillian, how are you doing?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm so glad that we've been able to stay in touch somewhat, and then we are returning back into this space to have some really heartfelt and honest conversations around the real juices about life and living. But no, I'm so glad to be here. And everyone who's watching and listening, hi, my name is Lillian. So I am born and raised in Singapore, but currently, for the past 6 years now, I have called Houston, Texas, in the U.S., in the United States, my home. I think me and Ahad, we found each other on online somewhere, like on Instagram somewhere, because we're both so like avid podcasters that love this platform and love having just heartful conversations. So it was a natural fit, and I can't believe it's been a year now since we last you last recorded. I think the episode was maybe aired 3 months ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, a few months ago.
yeah. No, it's so good to see you, and I'm so happy and glad to be here with you.
I am shocked that it's been that long, to be honest. And what's shocking to me more is the correspondence we
Yeah,
were doing.
yeah.
It was so much fun that we were mailing each
Right.
other and then not replying to each other and then replying to each
Yeah,
other. It went on for
it's
almost a year
true.
apparently that we were in contact and
Yes,
discussing it
indeed,
and talking.
indeed.
And it's amazing because in this day and age it's become so difficult,
Yeah,
Lillian, to stay in touch with
yeah,
people that I'm grateful that you took out the opportunity, and I also had the patience to just keep checking up with each other,
yeah,
talking to
yeah,
each other, you know, realizing that okay, no, I do want to talk
yeah,
to this person.
yeah,
They might be busy. You sending me a mail, I'm not replying for a few weeks, or I'm gone somewhere. I reply,
yeah.
you're gone for a few
Right,
weeks, then you reply
right,
somewhere.
right.
If you tell someone about it, they're not going to agree with it. They're like, what is this?
Yeah,
It should be number one. But sometimes
yeah,
life happens.
yeah,
And I'm really grateful to have you
yeah.
here.
Same.
We really want to get into it,
It's
Lydian. And what we want to do today here is already mentioned in the introduction, right? We want to talk a little bit about why we do what we do. I am quite confused these days with the problem of awareness and how people really think they know what awareness means, but they're not really aware of what they're doing, right? A lot of people call this autopilot,
mm,
right? You're just living life on autopilot. You're just enjoying it. You're just
yeah,
breezing through it. You're not really intentional about it. But whenever you are intentional about it, there are certain things that become a bit more difficult. You
yeah.
suddenly ask yourself those hard questions. Why am I here in this new country?
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing
Yeah,
here? Is it worth it?
yeah,
Right? Am I really just a person who cannot sit by myself during these isolated periods of COVID? Do I really need to surround myself with people and noise and just fluff
yeah,
to feel like I'm doing something positive in my life, right? So these are the discussions I want to have with
Mhm.
you. And you told me already offline that there are wonderful stories and not so
Yeah,
wonderful
yeah,
stories that go around describing what you have done and why you do what you do. So I really want to just take it all the way
yeah,
back to
yeah.
Singapore, and you are preparing to come to Houston,
Uh-huh.
Texas, and why was that
Yeah,
important?
yeah. That's such a beautiful starting point. Happy to go all the way back there, and yeah, already able to relate to some of my experiences to these questions that you have. Really, I think when we talk about awareness, it's to me, at least through, even through my observations and learnings, having gone through therapy, I think I've been told, and I've lived experience to confirm that awareness is really like the first step to even making any change or effecting or wanting any change for yourself. Because if you're not aware of what's there, what needs to change, then why you will not be convinced enough to make that change. And I think being aware
Mm,
can be difficult, and it's easier to do things autopilot, because it takes courage to like really listen to yourself, right? To really ask yourself those hard questions. And I think it's easier to ignore it than like confront it. And so I think it takes a set of skills. And that's where I strongly believe things like therapy comes in, having conversations like this comes in, right? To really build the muscle to have those conversations with yourself, because it's scary. It can be very intimidating initially. But so that's just a general remark, but let me take us all the way back to Singapore. So a bit of a backstory, and this is funny because I this past weekend I just met with a group of Singaporeans that I've not met before, and we came together for Singapore's 59th birthday, and we had a little gathering celebration here that involves food, obviously, and karaoke, obviously, also.
mhm,
So I have a bit of a practice, like just kind of telling my story a little bit of how I came here just this past weekend. But yeah, so I came here primarily for my relationship. Um, if you ask me back then, I tell people I came here for my then boyfriend, but we'll get to that. So I came here to further develop my relationship with my then fiance, now husband. We started dating in Singapore. He is from here. He was transferred there for a project. We met. We did a year and a half of dating in Singapore. When the project ended, he had to leave. We did long distance for like a year and a half. And in that time, one of the last times that I visited, I think I came in total of like 4 times, maybe just flying over here, visiting, hanging out, taking vacation. And one of the last times he proposed, and well, like, okay, well, we really want to start thinking about trying to close the gap physically, because this long distance thing is not going to work long term. So we obviously considered Singapore, Houston, or somewhere else altogether. Obviously, I would have loved for him. My ranking was Singapore, somewhere else altogether, then
then
Houston.
Houston.
Yes. Um, so when we had that discussion, well, Singapore was easily rolled out because he has a standard of living that like unless you have an expat package, which he had when he did his stint in Singapore, then it can be
Yeah,
hard to get used to. Like owning
yeah,
cars and homes can be really expensive.
expensive. Yeah,
So for him, he's just so used to space and everything being wide and having all this room at home. So it was going to be
that's a very American thing. That's a
big,
very
yeah,
American thing.
big time. And I think between he and I, him, the fact that he actually owns his own house in Houston, it just made practical sense. So Houston was the more practical
Mhm.
option. And then obviously I was actually also really excited about the fact that we can both start anew and be like, okay, we'll both be ground zero, and we just lean on each other to build our life together in a whole new place altogether. And the Netherlands was on the list, obviously, since he had worked there. He had worked for a Dutch company, and I still do, and we loved it there. But in hindsight, if we had gone with that option, life happens, things happens. There has been times where we needed to lean on friends and family, should an unfortunate something happen. And to think that if we have gone that route, and maybe it was going to take a while for us to build trustworthy and reliable people and contacts to lean on. Yeah,
Still,
it would
yeah,
have been
yeah.
tough. So yeah, so in the end, Houston was the practical option and solution, and practical also in the sense that the company that I work for had an outfit here in Houston. So I obviously, if possible, I didn't want to lose my ability to have an income and to support myself financially, because then it will be too hard on him as well. And I already feel like I was going to be depending on him for a lot of my life, my new life in Houston. And I didn't want to take away that financial independence away from me. So one of the first
Mm,
things I decided to do was go talk to my company, and I said, hey, so this is happening in my personal life. If you guys can support it, great. If not, then I might not be able to further or continue my career with the company. So the company was supportive of it. They made it happen. So I was one of the lucky ones amidst a lot of people, I think, even just specifically Singaporeans or immigrants, to have been able to come here
mm,
on a very solid visa. It's what they call an L1 visa, which like protects your legality here to live and work, and then with an added support to elevate and strengthen your chances to get married and then start the green card process. So I was on a very good
yeah.
visa. So that brought me here. And yeah, when I think back in about how it was for me emotionally coming here, it was just all over the place. It was hard. Like my parents, my mom struggled with it. My brother, he is my younger brother, and he's not
Mm,
as, I guess, mature and independent as I am. So I worry about what it means with me gone. And my friends, obviously, I have a very active social life, and to walk away from that was really hard. So there was a lot of like
mm,
farewell, saying goodbyes, packing up. Yeah, it was, and then I believe in that time my family was also moving to another house, so it helped with the decluttering process because I needed to anyway. But no, it was very challenging to think back on it. I think if my mom wasn't a more progressive mom and someone who supports her children in the decisions that they make, I think it would have been even harder. So yeah, I'm very
mm,
grateful that she was supportive of it, even though she wasn't sure, because we were still dating then. I mean, he proposed, but it was like it's still quite a foreign idea that what my daughter is going to marry a non-Singaporean and going to move like across the country, like what's happening, like what's going to happen. And because we all live together, right, we have lives that are so intertwined in Singapore. So for her, she was like,
yeah.
who's going to do the chores, who's going to take care of her when she's sick and all that stuff. So and then also I had to learn how to drive here, and I learned how to drive in Houston, which I didn't have to in Singapore. And she was like
Yeah.
what? So it was tough to like, and it gotten to a point that I think now 5.5 years down the road, I've learned to find a way to only tell her things that she needs to know. She doesn't need to know about the shootings that happened every other day here, like, or like a car accident that happened every minute here.
Mm,
Like, it's wild because it's only going to make her worry more. So anyway, fast
yeah.
forward. So yeah, so I packed my bag, came here, and like I said, one of the luckier things for me is financially I'm supported, so I still have a job to look forward to. So I have some stability in that sense. I came here, I unpacked,
Mm,
I was able to show up in the office and meet my new colleagues and get into a rhythm and routine there. So that was
mm,
nice. But other than that, the finding acquaintances, meeting friends, driving, and getting to like his friends, like his family, spending a lot of time around them, and then our lives, living our lives together, which we never. I've stayed overnight before in Singapore, but it's still not the same. Like now, I'm like going to do life with him, and all of a sudden, there was like a myriad of new information about him, about his social circle, about how he is with his circles here.
his
Yeah.
habits.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, okay, okay, like some things was fine and some things wasn't. I was okay. I was like getting these new information, and I was like, okay, I'm not sure I would have done it this way, but fine, that kind of stuff. So yeah, and like I said, I like, other than through work, which I tried. I was actively networking, joining social groups, trying to make friends, put myself out there. But those were just fair weather things, right? Like fair weather friends. They're not friends who we can have these kinds of conversations with, like between me and you. It's just we meet at a networking
Mm.
thing, we exchange business cards, we talk about what we do for work and what we do for fun. And over here, they love to talk about sports, which was something I struggled with. And I was like, what? Okay. So yeah, it was like
Oh
yeah,
my
no, I'm
god.
not kidding. So I was like, this is a whole different world. I don't get it. And people don't seem interested to want to know you. They don't really care. Like it
Coffee shop
yeah.
conversation, right? They just want to have like
Yes,
shallow
yes.
conversations. Yeah,
So
I get that
yeah.
completely. It happens
Oh, it wasn't
everywhere.
long before I made the conclusion that people here are fairly self-centered. They don't really, there's no sense of community, or very little sense of community. And that you have to constantly watch your back, because people, businesses are only trying to get the better of you. So I mean, scams, or people that are trying to cheat you, like, you always have to be the smarter person, because if not, then you will be at disadvantaged. So it was stressful. Like I didn't know a lot, right? Like I all of a sudden it came into perspective that my life in Singapore, it's so sheltered. I could walk around at 3 a.m. after hanging out at a club with some girlfriends in Singapore and feel zero like fear of getting being endangered or being a problem. But here, it's not the same. You have to watch your back. You don't know who is going to come at you with a gun, and because you don't look the way they look, which I also don't experience in Singapore. I mean, the majority there
Yeah.
are Asians and is Chinese looking too. So it was a lot of shock, like, coming into my system. So all of a sudden, I felt small, and I felt like uh, like I needed to be taught a lot of things. And I think that was a dynamic between me and my husband that really tipped it over. Like this, it almost felt like he needed to teach me and show me things, and I wasn't receiving it with open arms. I was receiving it with, like, well, like there was resentment. It was like, why do you have to tell me how to do everything? Like I'm an adult, I know how to do things. Where But he came from a good place, a caring place, but I took
Yeah.
it wrongly. And then that, in addition to
Mm.
just the resentment of the life that I have here, I miss my friends in Singapore, I miss my family. And that I only have work and him to look forward to, was just like a lot was lacking. So and it was coming out in a lot of different ways in our interactions with my
Yeah.
husband, in my day-to-day life. He could sense it, I could sense it as well. I was trying to not be aware of it. It was easy to just go
Yeah.
autopilot and be like, this is just how my life is going to be now. And the worst part was, I don't want my mom to worry. And she and I, we are close. So we talk like we're friends. And I find it very difficult to give her the full story, because I don't want her to worry. So then I felt very
Yeah.
alone. I felt like there was no one really understood what I was going through. So then it came to
Yeah.
a tipping point, really, when, I mean, obviously, in that time, in that year that we lived together before I moved out, there were fights, and some fight was harsher and harder than others. Words were other
Mm.
that wasn't great, wasn't pretty. Words that I still remember up to today. I mean, it definitely damaged us to some extent. So yeah, so then I just wasn't sure, because I at least got to a point that I was able to come to terms with the truth that I am not happy, because I think I was constantly blaming him for why I'm not happy. But I think I came to a point where I was at least able to establish that I am just not happy. Like, regardless of whether he's in the picture or not, my life here, I'm not
Mm.
happy. So it just, because I care for him, I don't think it's fair that he's unhappy with me. So I felt like I
Yeah.
needed to figure out um, what was going on with me, like, just in your exact words. And I needed the space to do that. So I made that decision. to to move away, to move out, um, and decided to live on my own. And I was even telling myself, maybe this is what I need. Just like maybe instead of having dived into this life together with him here and having to manage all these changes all at the same time, maybe I should have lived on my own. Maybe living on my own first will help, because then I can establish that independency on my own, and then feel and know for myself that I can manage, I can take care of myself here in this new country and new city, before throwing in the element of our life together. um,
That's
it's because I
yeah,
really resented how we had that dynamic of him having to teach, like show me, teach me everything, and then me having to almost be like the child in the relationship, and I didn't like that disparity. I have a bit of feminist in me too, so it's hard to stomach that to some extent. So
yeah.
I felt like that would do me good, so I did that. And I decided to try therapy as well. And what my
Yeah.
therapist termed what I was going through is called adjustment disorder, was what it's called, where
Okay. Yeah.
I'm struggling to adjust to a new city, new
Yeah.
place, new
Yeah. It's a
culture.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of things happening at once, I
Yeah.
assume. It's like that is the problem, right? Like, as you said, it would be nice that you could do like a step by step program that you just move
Mm,
there, be alone, understand, and then throw in the element of a person and their family and their social circle. And living with someone is already a big deal. Me and my wife have known each other for 10 years, and we still fight about how I am the dirty one compared to her.
yeah.
And I'm like, you know me for 10 years now. When will it stop? She's like, it'll never stop. I will never be okay with what you do. And I'm like, okay, then we just have to get used to the fact that this is going to be it. So it is amazing to see similar processes, not because of this thing. It's just the fact that when two people come together in this day and age of individualism, you two people are willing to come together and
Yeah.
compromise, but both of them are not really that comfortable with the
Yeah.
compromise, but they have to compromise because they like each other a lot.
Right.
But you still struggle with the compromise. That's where the awareness
Yeah.
part comes in, right? That you have to realize that a relationship is a
Right.
compromise. But we don't want to accept that. We're like, no, we are fully capable and we're choosing to be in this
Yeah.
relationship. So it's 50-50.
Mhm.
But is it really 50-50?
Right.
Is it really that? Is it not really you trying to compromise and make the other person happy?
Mm.
So you were alone, took you a couple of months, you told me
Yeah,
almost
almost
10
10
months
months. Yeah.
offline to realize, to find
Hmm.
yourself. And what was the solution that came out of it? What
Yeah.
awareness did you
Yeah.
reach that you decided to come together with
Yeah,
him
that's a
again?
great question. So, I think at the end of that, through therapy, through some kind of online coaching program that I took, where I could like look into turning passion into purpose, and that's when the podcast was born, all that stuff. And then in that time, I actually also was proactive about. I started a Facebook group, and I started to try to connect other transplants, immigrants that's in Houston, and that's when I actually carved a really nice friendship that I still have up to today, with a Malaysian, a Japanese, and another Singaporean. So it's yeah. So
Nice.
I think in that time, what I learned and what I was taught was that, well, first, that I need to be. I need to take responsibility for what's happening to me, and I need to take responsibility for how I feel. And that comes with, acknowledging the fact that I am unhappy, but that is not because of him, but because of what I choose to do and not to do for my own life, right? And that I have the
Hmm.
power to manipulate and adjust that to make that different. And I think the other thing I learned is that we can only give when our cup is full. And I think I didn't have a full cup. Like I was lost, I felt alone, I felt empty, so I was already
Hmm.
drained. So when you go into an interaction with someone drained, you tend to want to take from that person than being able to really start from a point where you're mentally, emotionally healthy, and you're ready to like give into something. So I
Hmm.
think that was also something else that I got out of that time. Um, And then I also realized that, especially with, having finding success with starting a podcast and having these conversations and making some friendships online for that time, I started gaining confidence that, hey, maybe it's how I do it, and maybe there are ways that I can find like-minded folks around here that I can have a connection with.
Mm.
It's hard, but it's not impossible. Like, hey, I can do this, I can do this. So I think once I started building that muscle and that confidence to do it, then it started, like, my world started having a bit more light again. Like, okay, it's possible. And I think in that time living alone, I was able to do things my way, right? I can have my routine. I wake up, I have a nice, I do yoga, I go for a long walk outside, I make coffee, I just like my own routine. And I think part of it was also seeing how I can continue to have my routine in our lives together was part of it too. So I realized that when I was living on my own and I have my routine, these problems that he had pointed out or that we had together became non-problems. It was fine. Like, it's like wasn't that big a deal that I wasn't washing the dishes the way he would like the dishes to be washed. Like, it became a non-problem is what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
it made me think, like, maybe what people say that being with a, like, yes, there's the like so relationships, humans are imperfect, relationships are imperfect, that, and yes, it's a bit of a fairy tale and BS that there is the one out there for you, but I also believe that there can be a wrong person for someone. Does that make sense? Like,
Mhm.
it could be that you're just not a good fit, and it's fine that if you're not, because it happens, it can. So it just brought perspective to, like, we I think what it was happening was I was trying to change him because I
Yeah.
wanted him and our lives together to look a certain way. But I think what I
Yeah.
walked out of that time on my own and therapy is that you can't change a person. Like, the person wants to want that change, right? And you can maybe talk about how something that he is like or doing, or your partner is like and doing, influences you and affects you, but it cannot be that you make me feel that way. And it's also the way you have those conversations. Instead of saying you make me feel this way, it's more I feel this way.
Feel this
Yeah,
way.
and
Yeah.
that's the accountability part of how you feel. So I think I kind of gathered and got all that skills around the conversations I have with myself, building more confidence within myself, and finding other tools and things that gives me happiness and purpose that's outside of my job and him, and that
Yeah.
put me in a healthier mindset to reconnect again. So obviously, so the thing was, coming here, I don't have a credit history. So, like, to get a car, for example, I needed it to be under his name before I could. So we were connected still in some way. So we have to exchange text around some of these logical, practical things in life. So we weren't completely disconnected, right? And I didn't move all of my stuff away from his house. I just took what I needed, knowing that we can still see if we can find a way to each other again, something like that. So that was the understanding. So how we reconnected again was, I think, maybe 8 months, 8 to 9 months down the road of me having moved out. We exchanged some text, and I was starting to come by the house to either pick up some things, or and in those interactions we would try to, like, have a sit down conversation about where I am. So I would tell him, like, some of these things that I've experienced, that I've learned, I've gained skills around, and my successes and wins around, like, hey, I got to know a new person today, and blah, blah. And he was like, oh, okay. So, well, that's all great stuff and all that. So he's been quite passive, I would say. I think he was just leaving me to deal with my own struggles. But obviously at some point that came that conversation of, like, okay, so what are we still doing? Like, are we still doing this, or are you just happy on your own now that you have your own life and your own routine, and you're going to go off and do that?
Yeah.
Or are we going to still find our way back to each other? And I think we had that conversation, and we decided that we are going to try a way to find our way to each other. And so yeah, and so then 2 3 months down the road, I found myself moving back into our lives together and bringing all these new learnings and my new sense of self and identity and confidence back into the relationship
Mm.
and trying to do that again. And I mean, now what, 4 years, 4 or 5 years down the road, it's a learning process. Like it's not a one hit wonder type of thing. Like it's, yeah, you have to work at it. It's like relationships are hard work. It can be. So you need to be
Mm.
willing. And I think um I what I see, the change that I did see in him is that I find that he is more receptive to hearing me out now. I think that's less like he wasn't snapping at the first moment I said I feel something. Like there is space to talk about those things. And I
Yeah.
think that, and sometimes honestly for women, that's all we need. Like what we need is just the space to talk about something, and not that we're looking to you for a solution. And I think sometimes that's a misunderstanding from the male perspective, that whenever we talk about our feelings and problems, we are looking to you for solutions. But that's not always the case. Like sometimes we just need a listening ear and a space to like put it out there, and we'll be fine after, um so yeah.
Yeah, I know that, I know that firsthand,
Yes.
and I can tell you honestly, Lillian, I'm very bad at it. So okay, I'm very, very bad at it. I think in general the male population is very bad at
Yeah.
it, because my wife is also complains to me about the same thing, that sometimes I just want to share stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but it's just a systemic mind. You tell me X is the problem, I'm like, I can make X go
Yeah.
away. She's like, no, I don't want X to go away. I just think X is a problem now.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that X is gonna be a problem tomorrow. And I'm like, X is a problem. That's all I'm
Yeah.
hearing. Now, tomorrow, it doesn't need to be temporal, right? It's just a problem. Let me just do away with the problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in that sense, it is very difficult. And I agree with you 100%. Relationships are
Yeah.
work. And I'm really happy to see that you got to come to the realization yourself through what I hear is a support
Mm.
system. I think that's a really key element that people sometimes forget about in this world of individuality, that we believe us to be
Yeah.
self-sufficient, that we can get everything done, right? Lillian is a feminist. Lillian knows how to handle herself. Lillian knows everything, but that's not
Yeah.
true. Lillian needs
Yeah.
help. Lillian needs to look at someone. Lillian needs to look up to someone. She needs to learn from people. She needs to learn techniques that she didn't know how to
Yeah.
deal with. I really, really loved how you talked about the fact that even I didn't know what I wanted. Like, I did not know where I was coming
Yeah.
from and what am I doing here. And those things are really, really important. If I go back to understanding how I came to be here in the Netherlands, the first 2 years of when I moved here, I was living
Mm.
alone. And then my wife then married and joined me in the house. Before that, we were together, but I came here and I was working in the apartment we got
Yeah.
together, but she was still living at her mom's, and this was the
Right.
place she's going to move into once we get married, because we come from a South Asian conservative
Right.
culture. So she was like, we're not going to move in
Yeah.
yet. So after marriage, I was like, okay, sure. So that alone
Yeah.
living really taught me a lot.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough that I did also my bachelor's abroad, so I did know a little bit about how to handle myself in a foreign country. So I think that became a bit more easier for me. But generally, that alone period, I really took it for granted. When I heard you say it, I
Mm.
realized, oh yeah, that is actually true, that I got to live alone for a while to adjust to this new reality of what I'm living in, before she came into my life with her whole host of
Yeah.
perspectives and expectations and alignments and
Right.
misalignments that came with
Yes.
it, because that's what it
Mm-hmm.
is. And you can try to make it as robotic as you
Yeah.
want. That's what I'm figuring out. So what you are saying is what I also believe, and I hear from everybody, that communicate, get better,
Mm-hmm.
learn how to talk, align with each other. I feel statements, but I also go like slowly, slowly. But that's not life. It's also robotic to an
Yeah.
extent. Sometimes you're just supposed to have
Right.
fights.
Yeah.
You're supposed to just,
Absolutely.
you want to scratch each other's faces. You're supposed to
Yeah.
do that. That's what love
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
intense. It's
Right.
intensity, and
Right.
that intensity comes out in different ways
Yeah.
sometimes, and that's fine.
Yes.
As long as what you said, and it's beautiful the way you
Mm.
said it, as long as you know that, are you trying to find your way back to each
Yeah.
other? And I think that for me, if I would wrap up the whole thing in the last half an hour in one sentence, would be that,
Yeah.
that what am I trying to do? What am I aware of? And I'm trying to get back to this one person that
Yeah.
I decided to be
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
It started from all the way back in Singapore 8 years
Right.
ago when you met him for the first
Mm-hmm.
time to
Yeah.
now. Life is just all about trying to get back,
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
right?
I think that's the key, that you believe and you want to be on this team with the person, and you act like a team player, a partner in that team, and that includes, like, it comes with respect, with not just love and care, the soft stuff, but also it comes with integrity and respect, and how you show your support for that person both inside and outside the house, right? I can't tell you how many interactions I've seen between wives and husbands outside, and I'm like, and I don't know that, like, we're very good about not, I guess, like, flaunting our dirty linens outside. Like, okay, if we have something we need to talk about, there's something that's not right, then we'll talk when we are back at the house. But we're really good about not bringing that around the
But
whole party. Which, oh my god, I
no, but I think that's the Asian in you. That's what I really think. That's the Asian in you because you're like, oh no, I can't talk about this because my wife is exactly the
yeah.
same. She's gonna be like, we're fighting till the door opens, right? And once the door opens, we're this
Yeah, all of a
lovey-dovey
sudden you're
couple,
like,
and our guests come in, like literally switch of a button, and our guests come in, and then she's smiling towards me, and she's referring to my stories, and she's propping me up that Ahad made this food. Look how amazing it is, and I'm just like, you were just swearing at me 5 minutes ago.
yeah,
What
yeah,
happened?
yeah.
And sometimes it's very difficult for me to process. I
Right.
I consider that, like I also consider that maybe it's that integrity,
Yeah,
or is that not?
yeah,
Because if I feel it's a certain way, I don't want to fake it in front of
yeah,
people. So let's just cancel it. Let's just not go outside till we figure this out. But that's me trying to be stubborn. I'm like, hey, no, no drama, no fakeness. But she's like, no, we need to live.
yeah,
We can't stop
yeah,
living. So we do it, we fake
yeah.
it, and when we come back, we try
Yeah.
again.
It's almost like you
And then
need
I
to
think
build
that's the
this
thing. Try.
resiliency around your own emotions too. Because it's like, okay, fine, we committed to this, we need to go out and do that. I'm just gonna reel all that back in, and we're just gonna do this and we'll just come back to that later, you know? And I like the fact that you brought up culture, because I think that's the other element that's also strikingly different between me and my husband, because I'm of Asian descent, and he is
Yeah,
from Peru, but he's born and bred in the US, right? So he has a very more
yeah,
American mindset. So even bringing that whole
yeah,
element, which it can be a whole different podcast episode on that, but even bringing in that whole cultural differentiation element was challenging too. Because I mean, I definitely did not do our relationship in the traditional way, according to the Asian way. Like, we didn't, like, we lived
yeah,
together before we got married, and like we
yeah,
never had a wedding ceremony. We just registered, and then all that stuff, and we have not had children yet, right? So obviously my mom
yeah.
in Singapore, it's like, she's, like I said, very supportive, but I mean, yeah, it's tough because I'm having to marry that, like, this is how we want and decide to do things, and it differs from how tradition's calling us to do, but it's just, this is how we would like it, right? So that's that, and I'm having to navigate that with my family, my distance family, and it's a whole thing. Yeah.
It is. And at the end, again, it goes back to being aware of the decision where you're doing what you're doing,
Hmm.
right? So you don't want to go and have babies or a big party if you don't know why you're doing
Right.
it, if you don't want it.
Yeah.
So I'm also of Asian descent, South Asian, and for us, my parents want a big party, and
Yes.
so do I.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, of course. And my friends go, like, some of them, they like, why spend so much money on a day? It doesn't even make sense. You don't even know half the people. I'm like, yeah, that's true. That is 100% true. But I also enjoy looking at happy faces around me. I enjoy the happiness my mom will have if I make that
Yeah.
decision. So for me, it's like, okay, let me do this. She's gonna be happy. I don't lose really anything. I don't mind, right? But when it comes to, for example, having kids, and if I don't want to have kids, I don't want to make kids happen just because my parents will be happy, because it's not going to be a positive and neutral. It's going to be a positive and negative
Yeah.
because I'm not ready to have
Oh,
children yet, for
right,
example.
right.
But I do have a
Yeah.
child, and I am 100% grateful for
Hmm.
that, and so is my parents.
Hmm.
They also love it so
I'm
much.
sure.
But now they keep complaining, come to Pakistan, come to Pakistan. And I'm like, I can't come to Pakistan. My family is here, my kid is here, my wife is here. I have to wait till I can come, till my baby is healthy enough, because we're not comfortable getting her sick yet.
Yeah.
But my parents are not happy with that. They're like, it's been almost a year plus, and this granddaughter of ours has never come to our country. And I'm like, yeah. come here, you have come here twice, I can ask you to come here again.
Mm,
So you have to find that compromise, and that all again goes back
yes.
to your intention and your awareness of knowing why you want what you want. And sometimes you just don't. Sometimes that's the struggle that I face,
Yeah.
and I'm very grateful to you,
Same.
uh, Lillian, that I got to experience this experience of understanding even how to find each other and being aware of it
Mhm.
with a partner who you know for so many years, yet making the decision to go away. So I want to slowly start
Sure.
wrapping up this conversation, and I want to do that by asking you difficult questions.
Okay.
And those difficult questions is understanding, and after being through going through that experience, after having 4 or 5 years together now, understanding that problems are non-problems. It's just a story in the mind. It's about how you frame it. That okay, the person wants it clean that way. They don't really care about me. It's fine.
Mm.
Right now, together, do you still get those feelings and those moments where you go like, did I make the right decision, or were you aware enough in that moment when you made this decision to try again that you go like, you know what, I'm gonna stick to this? And that is what I want to know.
Yeah. That's a great and hard question because I don't know. I don't think the answer is that straightforward. But I think at the end of the day, I am the fact that we fight and we when we make up, and the fact that we actually started talking about going to couples therapy together. I think that
Mm,
shows willingness the and on both sides for us to want to better the relationship, because relationships,
mm,
like I said, can have a toll, especially where we started and where we are now. We are at different phases of our own lives, like
mm,
professionally, as well, and then where we are mindset wise and all that. So I think it's always it's important to constantly work on their relationship. And sometimes if it reaches a point where between the two of you you no longer feel like you have the tools and resources to anymore, it's also okay to go back to the point of asking for help. um, and I think
yeah.
that's this is us being willing to say we're going to ask for help, we're going to keep working on relationship, we're going to keep finding a way to find each other. So I think that to me, it's so much more important in a partner, that instead of like having this perfect partner in my life, it's having this imperfect partner but one that's willing to work with me and to find us together is so essential to me. So I do feel like I
Mm.
have found myself my person in that sense. So yeah. So yes, I think obviously when you fight, you're like, this is the worst thing ever. But like there are definitely more times than not that I feel like yes, we are like we can make this work. That this is what I stand by. This
This is
decision.
what I
Yeah.
want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I'm smiling because I'm hearing the genuine authenticity with you with which you are talking right
Mm,
now, and then the gratitude that you feel I feel that you have for the relationship that you have, even though how difficult it might sound that sometimes it
yeah.
gets. And I think that really takes home the point for me about how relationships are supposed to be hard. They're not supposed to be easy. Life is supposed to be hard. It's
Yes.
not supposed to be easy.
Yes.
When it's too easy, you take it for
Hmm.
granted. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be difficult. Me and my wife also discuss therapy all the
Yeah.
time. Me and my wife also have fights all the time. And my wife always tells me, "Why do you want to keep fighting with me?" And I'm like, I'm not keeping fighting. We are learning.
Mm,
We are learning about each other every single day. We're learning about each other as partners, as people. And going back to the point of how you said that you don't believe, like you believe there is a one, but can also be a wrong one or a right one. I think there is no right one.
hmm.
That is a myth.
Yeah.
It's always a one who can work,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's all it
Right.
is.
Right.
It cannot be the one. The
Exactly.
butterflies don't exist. That's all hunky dory
Yes.
fun
Yeah.
things
I think
people talk
Hollywood
about.
needs to stop putting out those movies to tell us those fake narratives. Like this happily
That is
ever
how it is.
after thing. It's like no, stop. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% because I do this exercise with my wife that she hates so much. Whenever we have a fight or something, so I always say, okay, so do you want to end it? And she gets so annoyed, especially since now we have a baby,
Yeah.
because now it's not that easy anymore, right? And she hates it. She's like, "How can you even think about that?" I'm like, "No, I'm not thinking about that. This is an exercise in which I make you realize that was this fight really is this fight really that big?
Mm,
Because if it was that big, you would think of ending it.
mm,
But if you don't think of ending it, then nothing is really big,
mm.
and we can fix it, right? So that exercise, although it backfires 9 out of 10 times because she gets more mad when she hears that, it works for me because it makes me realize that, yeah, at the end of the day, it's not a deal breaker.
Right.
It's hard, but it's not a deal breaker. And it's never going to be a deal breaker, or else we would not have gotten this far,
Right.
right? Anything that is hard, it is supposed to be
Yeah.
hard. Navigating a family back home and living abroad with a partner that you're still working with, that the one you love to death, the one that is completely different from you, it's supposed to be hard. It's not supposed to be
Yeah.
easy. And the funny
Yeah.
part is, I'm not speaking just about
Mm.
you. The same applies to me,
Right.
and that's what makes it so
Yeah,
beautiful.
it
That
is.
it is a story that a lot of people face in navigating different worlds, navigating different perspectives, and then at the end navigating
Yeah.
yourself.
Yes.
It's difficult, it's
Yeah.
intense, and I am so happy to have you on this podcast, to have
Same.
this conversation. It was a roller coaster, Lillian, of
Yes.
emotions, of experiences
Yes.
that I had with you, and I'm so happy
Yeah.
that you got to share these with me.
Same.
I want to leave some time for you to share a little bit about your podcast, the one that I was
Mm.
at the one that I really enjoyed as well,
Mm.
and of course anything else you want to say to close off this
Oh
conversation.
my gosh, I have so much more I can say, as you know, but yes, I'm gonna try to concise and keep it in the next few minutes. Well, like thanks again. This I don't know. I think ever since that period of isolation and therapy, I don't think I've ever revisited that whole experience to this succinct of a level as I have with you now, a few years down the road. So I do want to appreciate and thank you for creating such a safe and such a really mindful space for me to be able to express myself and tell my story this way. As for my podcast, like I mentioned, that was a passion project. That is still a passion project that I kind of do on the side. It's almost like therapy for me as I have these conversations with like-minded individuals. I've kind of gone a little bit all over the place when it comes to the type of guests I bring on, but they generally the through theme is that they're Asians, the Asians. So it either could be like Asian immigrants, transplants to new cities, or they are like Asian and usually female. You're one of the rare males that have come on, which is an interesting point. I'm like, maybe like is there a dynamic here around male and female talking about like the harder stuff in life? But that's a whole different topic. But like Asian female entrepreneurs, people who are following their passion and all that. Like I'm really curious about their story, their journeys, and when it comes to immigrants and transplants, to exchange insights and to kind of bounce off ideas about how it was for them versus me. And I've also now in this new season started to interview folks in Singapore whom
Yeah.
they have contributed to just keeping our culture alive and all that. And I'm just curious to connect with them to kind of talk about the Singapore culture and just in a way
Yeah.
to keep me connected to home. So
Yeah.
yeah, so the name of my podcast is called Heart Open Conversations, like just a play on words on conversations. And I put out like a new episode every other Thursday or Friday. And yeah, that's been some good conversations, including the one with you that's already published. So definitely feel free to find me on Apple Podcasts, Google. And I think I have episodes all the way up to the end of this year that's planned out. So a good like 15 episodes planned for
Wow.
this
Wow.
season. And we'll see. This is
Yeah.
like the fourth season. So we'll see if I'll keep doing it. But I've been enjoying it so far. And it has helped me, like I said, to get these things out of my system with people that I could have these
System. Yeah.
conversations with. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also therapy for yourself in a
Mm.
way. Like so you work it,
Yeah.
and it's as much as you for you, then it's for the other
Yeah.
person
And I
as well.
think
I feel quite
Yeah, and
similar.
I think when I
Yeah.
hear someone else's journeys and stories, it kind of brings perspective to mine too, and my situation, my challenges. And sometimes it makes my problems feel smaller. I'm like, okay, like, or like sometimes it gives me resources as to be like, oh, how can I do my podcast better? Or like, that
Yeah.
person is starting a business and all these different things that I'm picking out. And I'm just a curious person in general. I love learning. So I
Yeah.
think this also is a way of filling myself up with like things that I hear and learn and experience and
That,
feel. Yeah.
100%. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I do the same. I feel the same. And I thank you so
Yes.
much for your time,
Thanks,
Lillian. The
Ahad.
links of everything that Lillian mentions is going to be on the description. So I will take it from Lillian. I'll put it here. So if you are interested, you can immediately go and watch our episode at Lillian's podcast and anything else you want to do right in the description below. So thank you so much, Lillian, for your
Thank you,
time. I am
Ahad.
so happy and I would like to stay in touch with you this time
Yes.
with faster
Yes.
emails than slower emails.
Yes. Yes. Let's do that. I would love it. Thanks, Ahad.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye. And thank you so much, everybody, for a wonderful
Thank you,
conversation.
everyone.